Imagine living a peaceful life, respected, admired, loved. You trust the people closest to you. You build a future with them. You raise children. You honor your parents. Your children love honor and respect you as well. Now imagine all of that was built on a lie so horrific. It would unravel the truth behind every bedtime story, every family photograph, and every loving memory. Welcome back to Mystery Crime Vaults. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more twisted true crime tales where reality is far darker than fiction. This is a story of Margaret Holmes, a teacher who vanished without a trace, a woman whose family secret, unearthed by a simple school project, would ignite a chain of events so disturbing it would haunt a small Colorado town forever. But was her disappearance a desperate escape from trauma? Or was she silenced to protect a legacy of horror? Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This is not just a mystery. It's a warning about how far people will go to keep their past buried. Margaret Holmes, Maggie to those who knew her, was the kind of person who made everyone feel seen. At 39, she had become a fixture in the quiet mountain town of White Pine, Colorado. A high school literature teacher, Maggie loved her students fiercely. She organized book drives, coached the poetry club, and taught creative writing classes on weekends. Her husband, Daniel Holmes, was a principal of the same school. A tall, composed man with a commanding presence and a calm demeanor, Daniel was widely respected. Together, they seemed invincible, partners in education and in life. They had 4 children. Claire, 17, smart, confident, and outspoken. Jonah, 15, athletic and quiet, with a tender heart. Isabel, 12, the family artist, always sketching and painting. Phoebe, 7, a ball of energy with a vivid imagination. Behind their 2-story cedar house sat a smaller guest house, where Daniel's mother, Martha Holmes, lived, a retired psychologist and respected community member. Martha was viewed as wise and maternal. She helped raise the kids, hosted Sunday dinners, and read bedtime stories when Maggie and Daniel were busy. To the outside world, the Holmes family embodied grace, intellect, and warmth. But what no one knew, what not even Maggie fully understood, was that beneath the surface, something terrible was festering. It started like any other school project. Claire, the eldest, came home from her AP history class excited about a new assignment. "We're doing a genealogy project," she said at dinner one evening. "We have to trace our ancestry, make a family tree. I thought it'd be fun if we all took DNA tests." Maggie smiled warmly. "That's a great idea, sweetheart." Jonah chimed in. "I bet we're part Viking." Isabel said, "What if we're royalty?" Phoebe whispered, "I hope I'm from a family of witches." Everyone laughed, except Martha. The older woman stirred her tea without looking up. "It's not necessary," she said. "We already know who we are." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Mom. It's harmless. Just a bit of family fun." Maggie caught a flicker of something in Martha's eyes, something she couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Anger? But the moment passed. The tests were ordered, saliva collected, sent off, and life continued. For a while. 3 weeks later, the email notifications arrived. Everyone gathered around the family computer, excited to see their ancestry breakdowns. Claire's results were typical, mostly British and Irish, some Eastern European. But when Daniel opened his report and compared it to the children's, he frowned. "That's weird." "What?" Maggie asked. Daniel leaned closer to the screen, his brows furrowed. "These results say I'm not biologically related to any of the kids." The room went still. Maggie froze. That can't be right. Daniel laughed nervously. Probably a glitch. I'll email the company. But his voice was too calm, too forced. Martha didn't say a word. She stood up quietly and left the room. Over the next week, Daniel contacted the testing company multiple times. He ordered a second test from a different lab. When the second results came back, the truth was undeniable. Daniel Holmes was not the father of any of his children, but the test revealed something even more disturbing. The children's DNA matched closely with his own mother. Daniel confronted Maggie in the kitchen. The children were out, the house eerily quiet. He slammed the printed reports on the counter. Explain this. Maggie picked them up, scanned the results, then looked up at him with wide eyes. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Don't lie to me, Daniel said, his voice cracking. There's only one person in this house who could be a biological match for our kids, other than me. Maggie backed into a chair, trembling. I didn't know. What do you mean you didn't know? He snapped. I didn't remember. Not at first. Maggie began to sob, her hands shaking. And then the dam broke. She told him everything. Years ago, just after their second child was born, Maggie had begun experiencing memory blackouts, nightmares, moments of disorientation. She thought it was stress, but she remembered one night, vividly. She had woken up in the guest house. Her clothes were disheveled, her body ached, and Martha was standing over her, holding a glass of water. You fainted, Martha had said calmly. I found you outside. Maggie never believed that explanation, but she was afraid to question it. Over time, the memory faded, until the dream started again. She said I was overworked, Maggie whispered. She offered me tea, told me it would help me sleep. Daniel's hands were clenched into fists. You're telling me my mother drugged you? Repeatedly, Maggie said, weeping. I never told you. I was afraid you'd think I was crazy. I didn't want to break our family. Daniel turned away. His breathing was ragged. My kids, he said, barely audible. They're hers. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch, still in his work clothes, replaying Maggie's confession over and over in his mind. His wife, his partner, had been violated under his own roof. His children were not his by blood, and the person who had done it wasn't some stranger or a neighbor. It was his own mother. He looked at the family photos on the wall. Each image now felt like a mockery. The smiling faces, the birthdays, the holidays. He felt like an imposter in his own life. When morning came, he didn't speak. He couldn't even look Maggie in the eyes. She tried to talk to him. I didn't want this, Daniel. I didn't know how to tell you. But he wasn't listening. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere dark and distant. The next morning, Maggie was gone. No note, no packed bags. Her phone was still charging on the nightstand. At first, Daniel thought maybe she went to a friend's house. But by nightfall, panic set in. He called everyone. Her co-workers, her friends, her sister in Oregon. No one had seen or heard from her. He filed a missing persons report. The police organized a search party. Dozens of volunteers combed through the surrounding forests and riverbanks. Helicopters flew overhead. Divers searched the lake. Nothing. No blood. No clothing. No phone pings. Maggie had vanished as if she'd never existed. The town mourned. Candlelight vigils were held. Posters were taped to every telephone pole. Daniel stood in the center of it all, numb, hollow, and increasingly convinced that his mother had something to do with it. 2 weeks after Maggie's disappearance, Daniel entered his mother's guest house while she was out grocery shopping. He climbed into the attic. It was dusty, dimly lit by a single bulb. In the far corner, he found a chest, metal, old, and locked. He broke it open with a crowbar. Inside were dozens of journals, dating back nearly 30 years. He flipped through them, horrified. Martha had documented everything. Notes about Daniel's childhood, comments on Maggie's beauty and potential, cryptic lines like, "She resisted again. I'll have to adjust her dosage." And one entry, dated 6 years ago, "Daniel will never know. Our bloodline is preserved." He dropped the journal and backed away as if it had burned him. Then he found something even worse. Taped inside of the chest were Polaroids, blurry, grainy, but unmistakably showing Maggie unconscious in the guest house bed. Daniel sank to the floor, vomiting into an old laundry basket. He didn't go to the police. He knew how complicated this was. There was no physical proof Maggie was murdered, no clear record of what drugs were used, no DNA that would hold in court after all this time. And he didn't trust the system to understand what this was. This wasn't just abuse. It was a generational violation, a psychological war Martha had waged under the mask of kindness and wisdom. So Daniel devised a plan. He began to manipulate her. Subtly, he left printouts of the DNA test in her mailbox. He whispered questions during Sunday dinner like, "Do you think secrets always come out in the end?" Or, "What if someone did something unforgivable and didn't even realize it?" Martha grew suspicious, then anxious. Her behavior shifted. She started locking her doors, muttering to herself in the garden. It was working. Daniel was going to extract the truth. One stormy Sunday evening, Daniel invited Martha to dinner. The kids were staying overnight with Claire's best friend. The table was set neatly. Steak, roasted potatoes, a bottle of wine. Her favorite tea blend was already steeping. Martha arrived with a cardigan draped over her shoulders and a tight, wary smile on her face. They made small talk. She asked about work, about the kids, about Maggie. Daniel kept his face neutral. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Rain battered the windows. He poured her tea. "Chamomile," he said. "I remembered it's your favorite." She sipped it slowly. Then again, her hands began to tremble. 10 minutes later, her eyelids drooped. Her muscles slackened. "What did you—" "You taught me how to make tea when I was 5, Daniel said calmly. "I learned from the best." Martha slumped in her chair, paralyzed but awake. Daniel dragged her to the basement. In the basement, he had already set everything up. A camera, lighting, a microphone. Behind her chair were the family portraits, each one carefully positioned. In front of her was a laptop with a private live stream broadcasting to several therapists, legal experts, and educators he trusted. "Good evening, Mother," he said, checking the audio. "Tonight you're going to tell the truth." Her eyes widened. "You're going to confess to what you did to Maggie, to what you did to me, to this entire family." She blinked in terror. "You're not drugged. You're not sedated. You're just paralyzed. You can still speak. And you will." He pressed a button on the keyboard. A robotic voice from the laptop read the first prompt. Please state your full name and confirm you are of sound mind. Martha's voice came out in a strained whisper. Martha and Holmes, I am of sound mind. For the next 2 hours, she confessed. She admitted to drugging Maggie, to manipulating her, to using Daniel's childhood prescriptions to control her emotions, to violating Maggie repeatedly. And worst of all, she claimed she did it for the family. I had preserved the line. She said, Daniel would have failed. Maggie was strong. It had to be done. When the confession was over, Daniel ended the stream. The files were saved, copied to USBs, uploaded to encrypted servers. He called the police. Martha was arrested without incident. She tried to deny everything at first, but when faced with her own video confession, she fell silent. Police investigators searched the guest house. They found additional evidence: pill bottles, syringes, photographs. They even found a blood-stained rug beneath a false floorboard. It was enough to reopen Maggie's case. Though her body was never recovered, the case was upgraded from missing person to homicide. The courtroom was packed during the trial. She was found guilty of sexual assault, abuse of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and second-degree murder. The sentence: life in prison without parole. Daniel sold the house and moved his children to Oregon, where Maggie's sister lived. The kids were enrolled in therapy. They took new last names. Daniel resigned as principal and began working as an advocate for trauma-informed education. He never remarried. Every year on Maggie's birthday, they visit a quiet lake just outside Portland. They throw flowers into the water. They whisper prayers. No body was ever recovered, but in their hearts, Maggie lives on. Maggie's absence was a wound that never closed. Though Martha had confessed, and the evidence overwhelmingly supported foul play, not having a body left a gaping void in Daniel's soul and in the minds of their children. Phoebe, the youngest, had nightmares for months. She would wake up crying, asking, "Is Mommy hiding because she's scared?" Daniel didn't know how to answer. Isabel stopped painting. Jonah became withdrawn. Claire, once fearless, spiraled into self-doubt and anxiety. The house that was once filled with laughter, music, and bedtime stories had become eerily quiet, like the life had been sucked out of it. Daniel often sat alone in Maggie's study, staring at the wall where her lesson plan still hung. Her handwriting, so familiar, was now a relic of a life taken too soon. One night, after the kids were asleep, Daniel walked into the attic of the main house. There, in a dusty corner, sat a wooden crate containing dozens of family heirlooms, portrait of ancestors, journals, scrapbooks, trinkets Martha had preserved for decades. He brought the crate to the backyard. Under the moonlight, he poured lighter fluid over the contents. With trembling hands, he struck a match and dropped it into the pile. The fire roared to life, and with it, generations of hidden rot turned to ash. Martha's legacy, once honored, was now erased by flame. As the smoke rose into the night sky, Daniel whispered, "No more secrets." What Martha had done wasn't just criminal. It was calculated, psychologically invasive. She had weaponized trust, used her training as a psychologist to manipulate, isolate, and destroy. Experts later called her a textbook malignant narcissist with delusions of bloodline preservation. But Daniel knew better. She wasn't sick. She was wicked, Therapists who reviewed her journals concluded that she had likely been preparing her plan for years, choosing Maggie because of her strength, intelligence, and fertility. She believed herself to be continuing a tradition, one she hinted at in her writing, but never fully admitted. Had she been abused by someone in her past? Or was she the original monster? No one would ever know. Daniel could have disappeared after the trial, could have taken his kids and lived out the rest of his life in anonymity. But he didn't. Instead, he founded a nonprofit, Silent Roots. The mission was simple: to provide legal, psychological, and investigative resources for survivors of intergenerational abuse, especially those dealing with family-based crimes that often go unreported due to fear or manipulation. He spoke at conferences, wrote articles, trained teachers and counselors to spot signs of coercive control and trauma. His story became a case study at several universities. Law schools debated his decision not to go straight to police. Psychology departments dissected Martha's profile. Daniel never glamorized what he did. He often said, "I didn't save Maggie. I exposed the truth too late. But maybe I can help the next person find it in time." As the years passed, the Holmes children grew into their identities, somewhat fractured but resilient. Claire became a psychology major and now works as a trauma counselor for teens. Jonah returned to White Pine as a coach and educator, quietly honoring his parents' legacy. Isabel rediscovered art and held her first gallery exhibit at 18, titled Shadows in Bloom. And Phoebe became a poet. Her debut collection, The Witch in the Family Tree, earned national attention for its raw exploration of memory, fear, and feminine rage. Each child chose a different path, but they all carried Maggie's memory with them. They rarely spoke of Martha. In their minds, she had died the day the truth came out. 5 years after Martha's conviction, a well-known documentarian approached Daniel about turning their story into a film. At first, he refused. "I've lived it. That's enough." But after consulting with his children and nonprofit board, he agreed on one condition: the film must center on survivors, not criminals. The documentary, titled Roots of Silence, premiered at Sundance and received critical acclaim. One of the most haunting segments featured Maggie's voice, recovered from a voicemail she left Daniel months before she disappeared. "I hope, no matter what happens, the kids grow up to be free. Free from lies. Free from control. I want them to love without fear." That line became the nonprofit slogan. Despite the confessions and evidence, one question remained: what happened to Maggie? Some believed Martha had killed her and buried the body in a remote mountain spot, far enough away to evade detection. Others suspected she had help, maybe from someone in town who owed Martha the favor. A few theorized Maggie had run away, that she'd faked her own disappearance to escape the pain and guilt. But Daniel never believed that. He said it during the documentary. She wouldn't have left the kids, not unless someone made sure she couldn't come back. Over time, the search was called off. Maggie was declared legally dead. But for Daniel, that door was never fully closed. In the final scene of the documentary, Daniel stands by a lake in Oregon, where he and the kids go every year on Maggie's birthday. The wind rustles the water. The sun dips behind the trees. He holds a paper boat in his hand, covered in handwritten notes from the children. Messages like, "I miss your pancakes. Thank you for protecting us. I found your earrings. They still smell like you. He lights the edges and releases it into the lake. It burns quietly, floating away, leaving behind soft ripples on the surface. So, what do we make of this story? A devoted teacher, a respected family, a mother-in-law admired by the community, a DNA test that unravels everything. It's not the blood that defines a family, but the truth. And in this case, that truth came with a terrible price. Daniel Holmes didn't kill anyone. He didn't exact violent revenge. But he did something arguably more powerful. He exposed a hidden monster and made sure the world listened. Maggie's disappearance still haunts her family, but her story lives on. In the lives her husband and children rebuilt, and in the countless others they've helped protect. Would you have done what Daniel did? Would you have kept the secret to preserve peace, or shattered everything to protect the future? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't fiction. They're just hidden. When the full story broke, Martha's crimes, Maggie's likely fate, and Daniel's recorded confession, the town of White Pine became a battleground of opinion. Some hailed Daniel as a hero, a man who exposed evil in its most cunning form, someone who sacrificed his reputation to uncover truths that others would have buried forever. But others weren't so sure. Some whispered that Daniel had lost control, that he shouldn't have taken justice into his own hands, that maybe, just maybe, his version of the story was incomplete. And then there were the conspiracy theorists. Online forums speculated that Maggie never existed, that the DNA tests were faked, that the live stream was staged. One viral Reddit thread claimed Daniel had orchestrated the entire thing to cover up a crime of his own. The truth had come out, but with it came waves of distortion and noise. Daniel found himself at the center of a media firestorm. He was invited onto morning shows, true crime podcasts, and even contacted by book publishers. But he declined most of them. When he did speak publicly, his tone was calm, reflective, and often haunting. On a podcast titled The Family That Lies Built, Daniel said, "People think when you uncover the truth, you get closure. But there's no closure here, only clarity. And clarity can be just as painful." When asked if he ever considered revenge in the physical sense, he paused. "Every day," he said. "But then I remembered Maggie wanted our children to be free, not shackled to hate. I couldn't let her become another victim of a cycle we never asked to be part of." What happened to the Holmes family wasn't isolated. After the documentary aired, a strange and unsettling trend emerged. Families across the country who had taken recreational DNA tests began reaching out to Daniel's nonprofit. Stories poured in: hidden affairs, secret children, abusive relatives unmasked by shared ancestry matches. A single strand of saliva, it seemed, could demolish a legacy. Daniel started working with lawmakers and digital privacy groups to push for new legislation that would make it easier for victims to access DNA truth, while also protecting their identities from unwanted exposure. Some called it a revolution. Others called it an ethical nightmare. But no one could deny the truth. The Holmes case had opened a Pandora's box. From her prison cell, Martha never expressed remorse. During sentencing, she sat motionless, eyes glazed, showing no reaction as victim impact statements were read. Claire spoke first. "You robbed us of a mother. You robbed us of normalcy. And for what?" Some twisted obsession with your own bloodline? You're not a matriarch. You're a monster. Jonah followed. I used to think family was sacred. Now I know the truth. Family is sacred when it's built on love, not lies. But Martha remained unmoved. She died 3 years into her sentence from complications related to untreated diabetes. She was buried in an unmarked grave. Daniel didn't attend the burial. Neither did the children. There was no service, no obituary, just a line in the prison's weekly bulletin. Inmate number 47309 deceased. There was one memory Daniel could never let go of. It was the fall before Maggie disappeared. The whole family had gone to the town fair. Maggie had worn a yellow scarf, her hair in a messy bun, her cheeks pink from the cold. Phoebe had begged to go on the Ferris wheel, but no one else wanted to. Maggie smiled and said, "I'll take her." As they rose into the sky, Phoebe screamed, not in fear, but joy. Maggie held her hand the entire time. When they reached the top, Daniel remembered looking up and seeing Maggie smile down at him, wind in her hair, her eyes bright and content. That moment, the last truly pure moment, became Daniel's anchor. Whenever the guilt threatened to drown him, he remembered that smile. A year after Martha's death, Daniel was offered a lucrative book deal. The publisher promised distribution in over 40 countries, a speaking tour, and potential film adaptation rights. He declined. When asked why, he said, "Turning this into entertainment will be like selling the ashes of your own home." Instead, he worked on a small, self-published book, a collection of essays, reflections, and letters Maggie had written over the years, pulled from her journals and emails. It was titled Letters from the Quiet Side. It didn't top charts, but it was raw, real, and for those who read it, life-altering. 2 years after Maggie's legal death, while renovating a storm-damaged shed on the Oregon property, Isabel found something wedged behind the insulation, a sealed envelope with her name on it. Inside was a letter from Maggie. It was dated 3 days before she vanished. In it, she wrote, "Isabel, if you ever find this, it means I didn't make it back. But don't let my absence define you. Let my love guide you. I know what's happening now doesn't make sense. But one day, the truth will matter more than the pain. Keep painting. Keep dreaming. And above all, keep living honestly. That's how we break the curse." Daniel wept when he read it. It was confirmation, not just of Maggie's awareness, but her intent to protect the kids at any cost. The letter was framed and now hangs in the headquarters of Silent Roots. So here we are, a story that began with a genealogy test and ended in a generational reckoning. What does this tell us? That families can harbor deep darkness. That love can be manipulated. That even the wisest among us, psychologists, educators, leaders, can fall prey to obsession. But it also tells us something else. That one truth, no matter how small, can start a landslide. That silence, though powerful, is not permanent. That even when justice doesn't look like a courtroom verdict, it can still be achieved through courage, persistence, and sometimes fire. Daniel Holmes didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to be a father, a husband, a son. But life gave him something far more complex, and he faced it every day with brutal honesty. Every year, on the anniversary of Maggie's disappearance, the Holmes children and their father visit a quiet lake just outside Portland. They bring small paper boats, each carrying a letter, a drawing, or a memory. They light a candle. They whisper her name. And one by one, they release the boats into the water. Some carry messages like, I made the honor roll. I think you like my new girlfriend. I taught Phoebe how to cook your lasagna. We're okay. We're healing. These aren't acts of mourning. They are rituals of resilience. Because this isn't just a story about what was lost. It's a story about what survived. The Silent Roots organization now operates in 17 states. They've helped more than 400 families uncover suppressed abuse, reconnect children with estranged parents, and provide therapy for survivors grappling with truths revealed by modern DNA tests. Their work has influenced state-level legislation regarding disclosure rights in familial DNA cases. Daniel never profits from it. He says, the real inheritance I want to leave behind isn't money. It's truth. That's the only thing that doesn't rot. In the lobby of Silent Roots Oregon headquarters, there's a wall filled with framed notes, anonymous letters from survivors they've helped. At the center of that wall is a small, weathered quote from one of Maggie's final emails to her students. Truth is like a root. It grows even when buried. Before she vanished, Maggie had been working on a manuscript, a novel, fictional, but inspired by real people. Daniel found it on her old laptop. Incomplete, but beautifully written. The story was about a woman living in a village ruled by the elder mother, a wise and adored leader. But the woman begins having dreams, visions of a truth buried deep within the village's soil. With each dream, more of her reality fractures until she must choose, live in the illusion, or destroy the only world she's ever known. Daniel shared excerpts of the manuscript in Silent Roots newsletters. He never finished the story. He said, that was her journey. It doesn't belong to me to end it. So, what do we take from this? That blood isn't always thicker than truth. That legacy isn't always a gift. It can be a curse unless you break the cycle. And that monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes they sit at your dinner table, read your children bedtime stories, hold your hand at weddings. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we trust the most. But this story also teaches us something else. That one act of courage can set generations free. Daniel Holmes didn't just break a secret. He broke a system. This wasn't just a story of a teacher who vanished. This was a story of generational betrayal, of DNA exposing more than heritage, of a man forced to choose between silence and justice, and of a family that, despite it all, chose truth. Now we want to hear from you. Would you have done what Daniel did? Do you believe family is defined by blood or by love and honesty? Have you or someone you know uncovered a life-altering secret through DNA testing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their voice. And if this story moved you, even just a little, please share and subscribe. Because when we share truth, we make it harder for darkness to hide. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and never stop asking what lies beneath the surface.